right, we're on. Morning. Okay, see up there behind me is your second quote. Massive power is in self-awareness. Well, would one of you like to volunteer to tell everybody? Got to speak up. You want me to pick one of you? Andre, what does that mean to you? Is it true? Do you believe? One of my big three. Adjust. Really, it's really, I feel, a key thing in politically. If you're aware of yourself, aware of what your needs are, you're not, you're not as apt to just do something on the whim, and just fall into place. You'll be challenging things. I think you're self-aware of what you want, what you don't want, what you would do or not do. Okay, some of you might be wondering what these are. These are the questions that I already post. I didn't post the questions, but I said I was going to give you 3 questions for the weekend to have turned in Monday. And if you're online, they need to be sent to the Populi post site for me by 8:30 a.m. Monday. And people here in class will be turning them in after we get, just before we get started. So, okay, clear as mud, everybody? Huh? The actual written? No. Yes, I am. I will. Yeah, because before on Populi, I said there would be 3 questions coming. I'll probably type them in after I get home today. Yeah, yeah, because that assignment was already on, you know, telling you there'd be 3 questions today. So if you just want to copy them now, that's fine. Okay, I've got some things I want to share about Homer, and so people online will need to take notes, and this will be part of your note package. And by the way, that was one of the first assignments: is read this chapter and take extensive notes. Those are not due yet because we won't be able to turn those in until we complete Homer. So, but put this in your notes. Okay, anyone, either one of you guys know one characteristic about Homer? Supposedly blind, yeah. And they make reference the blind poet. There's a characteristic of Homer right there, a blind poet, um, storyteller. He was Greek. Just basic things. The textbook says we're looking at about 850 BC. Um, he was a storyteller that people came to. Uh, think about how many years before Jesus walked on the earth. Literally walked on the earth. This is, and think about what was known in the world was basically Greek, and the Greek gods, and the Greek gods weren't necessarily good gods in Homer's sense. He was what I would like you to write down. He was a apologist. We're going to make reference to this other word too, and he was pious. Okay. Apologist is somebody that sticks out of the norm. Apologist is, say, like Martin Luther King, who stood up for certain individual rights and freedom and peace. But you're going to find out as we go through world history that each of these individuals were apologists. They did something that wasn't in the norm, and they had to be very careful, and some more careful than others, because you were defying the trend of the day. And of course, he was an apologist because he doubted the evilness of the Greek gods, and were there such a thing? Although he wasn't considered a Christian in the sense that we know what Christians are, but he had those values. Pious basically means, in my definition, being open-minded. Being liberal, but not too liberal. But when you're an apologist and you're pious, both, you tend to, stick out, and you tend to be, a little more open-minded about things. You're willing to discuss things and to see both sides. Now, Homer's storytelling, even as the text made reference to, he often liked to get into arguments for the sake of getting into an argument. A lot of times he would pick the other side just to see what you would do or say. See if you had, let's say, facts or information of why do you believe that? What makes you think that's right? And that was one of his strong points. And some of his stories he made up, quite a few of them actually, just to prove a point, but also to provoke you to think. And it was critical in his characteristics that he would provoke you to think about the other side or both sides, or maybe even a possibility of a third or a fourth version of what really happened. Now, historically back then, about the only way things were spread around was word of mouth. And people would come long ways to come in and sit around and tell stories to each other, where they were from, what was going on. And as we discussed last class, we talked about how we often exaggerate our stories or add things to them to make them more presentable or more exciting, whatever terms that would happen. Okay, moving on. I like to. Homer understood something that a lot of people couldn't grasp. The difference between good and evil. Most people, most common people in Homer's time accepted things as they were. They didn't question that the sun rose over here and the sun set over here. They just took it for granted. Homer was the kind of guy that would say, why? What makes that possible? He wasn't very scientific, but he questioned things like that. He questioned the Greek gods and what they stood for. And as you know, there was many, many Greek gods. There was, the god of love, the god of hate, the god of this, the god of that. But he had a quality of he understood that there was good and evil everywhere, and that we needed to make choices. And which choice were we going to make? So, if in the common reality of common people, uh, they would not necessarily see the Greek gods as being an evil sort. Like, um, you need to go sacrifice this, or you need to go do this, or give this up, whatever it may be, in order to please the gods. And he questioned that. And a lot of people did not like that. Let's put it that way. Now, here's a word I want you to define for the class: deities. Do you know what a deity is? And if you do, you can help him. That's since there's, it has to do with. Okay, so if I use the plural deities, there are many Greek god deities. Okay, he says that I don't necessarily believe that, but he didn't come out and say, I believe there is a God Almighty that is controlling or did everything, as we as Christians would say. But he knew something was different. And he knew something, I don't know about you guys, but I've sat down on my patio and looked at things and thought about things and the question why, why I feel this way, why that is happening. I'm doing that a lot nowadays about what's happening in our society. And that's what Homer was doing. But he was frustrated in that he could not prove yet, or convince people that there was only one God Almighty. And I'm not so sure if that was what his plan was in the first place. I think his plan was just to explore things around him and to feel and touch things, and then try to talk about what he felt like. Because of this, people said Homer was a very wise and intelligent individual. And that all boils down to a definition of what you think that means. And but anyway, he struggled continuously with that throughout his whole life. Now, let's go back to Homer being blind. Okay, can you imagine yourself now, at your age, going blind? You would have at least some sense of what things are like, color. Not all, but most all blind people, including my sister, she's blind in one eye, but she can still see shadows. She can tell if she covers up her good eye. She can tell if it's daytime, nighttime, things like that. A lot of scholars still don't understand if he was truly blind or if he had a degenerative eyes, infection, and he could see shadows and kind of images. And then the next thing is they have no clue when he became blind. Was he born blind? Now, do either one of you know anybody that's blind? No? Not really. Okay, it's hard to fathom, if you haven't been there, I know. It is for me, one way to do that is, cover your eyes and try to get around. Think about, did he have a group of people with him if he was totally blind to get to where he was going to tell his stories? Or maybe this happened. He basically stayed in one central area and people came to him and that's the textbook makes you think of that, and makes you think that they came to him to listen to his philosophy, his stories, his reasoning, And sometimes you would think, wow, this person is blind and he has all this knowledge, so he must be very, very wise. He doesn't do anything wrong. So the picture is painted that he is a very righteous individual. And that's a characteristic you can take one way or the other. So, okay. Now, have either one of you started reading the Odyssey? A little bit. It's not an easy story, but you got to remember when you read it, and I think some of you have already got into it, the people online, but you need to realize it's a tale. It's a story that's made up. It's and he has characters in the story that symbolizes good, evil, just, all the spectrum of everyday things. Excuse me. And he has, got to have a hero when you have a story. You got to have an evil person or an evil thing, et cetera. You got to have supporting cast, just like a movie or a play. And that was something else he was really good at. And of course, you need to ask yourself, how did this all get written down? Who and when? Was this story, and you might want to do this, passed on generation to generation, and were the names changed or altered? But that's part of being open-minded and thinking of, whoa, who's the hero of the story, by the way? Odysseus, yes. Who is the evil one? Cyclops, yes. But if you got a hero and a bad person, they're going to represent the two sides, goodness and evil, good and bad. And what's remarkable about this story of the Odyssey, when you look at it, I don't know if you noticed this yet when you started reading, it is book number 9. If you read the entire Odyssey, it is quite long, and it goes into great detail. And can you imagine an individual coming up with all that information and all that storyline? And he puts it on an island, or he puts it someplace else. Of course, he has more than one story. You know the other story that he's famous for? There's, his two. The Iliad and the Odyssey are the most two common ones that are talked about. And as I was very young, and it was mentioned to me in high school, but no way I was going to read it. But when I got to college, I had to. And anyway, just like you have to only read part of it and come up with some things about the story. I have another term I'd like to give to you. Logos, L-O-G-O, Logos, with an S on the end. The pursuit of Logos. You know what that means? Or what it stands for? What's the obvious thing? You guys out there in online world, think about it. What, if you're in the pursuit of it, what are we in pursuit of in our life? We are in pursuit of whom as a Christian? Hint. God. The perfect line, the perfect way, the perfect order. So this was an early term used for God. And that way you could get around the word Greek God with a little g. So with Logos, it's a big L, which will represent eventually God with a big G, the one and only true God. Okay, a little bit more about that. That word was around in his day, and there were Christians, but they weren't necessarily called Christians. But the philosophy of these people, without a so-called name, was, oh, these are the people that are pursuing logos. These are the people that don't believe in the Greek gods, so they're different, and maybe we should protest. Maybe we should punish them for not believing the way we do. And guess what? Some of that's happening today in different terms. And you can see what's happening out there on TV land. But these people struggled, and they kind of kept to themselves. Now, Homer realized that they were out there. And this is where he realized that there is something positive about this group of people. Even though he wasn't what you call a Christian, he had a lot of the beliefs and principles. I have a dear friend, and I made reference to some of the people that's had me in the past, that he really he thinks he's not a Christian, but he does believe in God. And every day, I see him almost every couple days, and we're great friends. And I tell him all the time, you have all these godlike qualities. You do this, you say this, and you denounce it, but you act in the principle of goodness. You're wise, you help people, you do the things, you love your neighbors. Sometimes you mumble about it, but you're there, and you try to do the right thing. And we all have that quality. Where we take it and how and what we do with it is, each an individual. That God gave us the ability to choose. And this is what Homer was trying to express, that you need to be able to choose between the good and the evil that's in the world. And by the way, he would say, I don't think these Greek gods is the way to go, but I don't have a name yet. But I know some people that have a name called Logos. And that might mean something, and of course through time it evolved, and the pursuit of goodness and a good God. So as he studied the Greek gods, Homer realized that there were both good and bad Greek gods. But why do we have to have so many different ones? And as you study history, you see that's pretty commonplace to have all. You have a god of this and a god of that. Sometimes our gods become part of us. I have a godly craving for, let's say, a Porsche, or to have a big house on the hill, or sometimes those become our idols and our gods, and we have to be very careful about that. And at least understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and where we're headed with that kind of thinking and beliefs. So, okay. On these questions, of course, question number 1, list 4 qualities or characteristics of Homer. There are probably 20. But you only got to do 4, but try to pick something unique out of it. We already talked about several, which is okay, for the first assignment. define the spiritedness of heterosthymos. Did you read about that yet? It's mentioned in the chapter. It's in the story of the Odyssey. Do you know what it is? You're shaking your head, yes? What was that? Okay, he's saying it's a different kind of spirit. Okay, that kind of fits Homer. He was looking for something that was different. Is it a good spirit, do you think? Okay, he says, I think that's what Homer was trying to get to, that the spirit of kindness. Um, it's mentioned towards the end of the story, but you can see it throughout the story if you're looking for it. It's a special technique that people have or use at times. And hopefully we use it all the time because it is good. And it is a good thing to have. And he actually tells, when he tells the story, it just falls into place at the end of the story. Let me give you an example. The other night on the news, Fox News, they had the lady on there, and her husband was a policeman that was murdered in one of the riots. And what do you think that might have to do with this? Will she, has she, or could she have a spiritedness of goodness? Think about yourself out there. Somebody harms your puppy, your cat, your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, or even yourself. What's the natural thing to do? Help! You guys got to speak up back there because I can't hear you. What's your natural thing? If somebody come in and did something bad to you, what would you feel or do maybe? She's searching. Huh? Grunge? Oh, revenge. Very good. Yeah. It's hard to forgive someone when they do something, let alone understand why. Well, in the story, he takes this a separate, different direction. He realizes, as you guys have read the story, that they're trapped, right? They're in a cave. In the cave, a lot of bad things happen. What's that represent? Bad things in life happen. What are you going to do? You're in a cave. How are you going to get out? Well, I'm going to call it the spirit of goodness. He realized that if they killed Cyclops, they couldn't escape because he was so huge and massive. And this could just be everyday things in your life. Some things just seem impossible to handle or to imagine. But if I strike out, I'm not going to be able to escape. And escape whatever it might be or what it represents. That's the key. So what do? They do something alternate, but they were able to get, escape. And that's what number 2 is about. So if you're having trouble answering that question, you've got a partial answer. You're just going to have to narrow it down so it's not so long, but as an example. It's almost like the saying, love thy neighbor, turn the other cheek. Oh, sometimes that's so hard. I had another self thing happen to me in my life with my daughter, and it took me a long time to forgive the person. And the person was very close in family to me as a single father, and I did a lot of things for that family and their children, and then this happens later, and it was really tough. Uh, and I probably should have thought more about what the Lord would have done and would have said, because I was in the transition state in my life of trying to understand and handle things. I think we all go through that. So, uh, number 3, that one shouldn't be too difficult. But what is dialectical? Dialect, talk, okay? So, are these type of arguments the kind that you just fly off the handle? What would you think? Since I only have 2 of you captive today, so you're going to be called on a lot. Help! You guys out there in TV land, video land, think about what kind of dialectical arguments. Is it a controlled argument, or is it a chaotic argument? Is it a massive, destructive protest? Yes. Say that a little louder. She's so bashful. Say it louder for me then, and I'll repeat it. Oh, this is part of your learning. That's why I want you all here in person. It'd be so much easier to pry things out of you and discuss it. But we'll have to do what we got to do for a while. Can it be both? Can it be chaotic and calm? Okay. She says it depends on the person you're talking to, depends on maybe putting words in your mouth, the situation. Some things are more argumentative than others. Some are a lot tougher to understand and to accept. But basically, a dialectical arguments are those that are under control. And Homer, again, tried to express that we do, and I already told you earlier, he tried to get people to disagree and argue with him, but he was also trying to show them there is a correct way to do it. So I can't help but go back to what's happening today, because it's happening. The protest movement has some purpose, but some people say it needs to be done without violence. It needs to be done without destroying property. And then we have, a group of people that are doing otherwise. Now, you got to believe and understand that was happening also in Homer's time. And sometimes in this particular segment and textbook of Homer, it doesn't say much about how he had to maybe watch his tone, or maybe sneak somewhere, or have people come where the bad protesters would come in and destroy them. Now, as we move through this world history cultures of individuals, you're going to see some did hide, some changed what they were saying and put it in words and writing that were altered. But the people that read it, it's like the Bible, you guys. Some of it is written that only the Jewish nation would understand at the time, that the Romans couldn't come in and oh, you're doing what you shouldn't be doing. You know, they were being wise and sneaky at the same time. The Christians, but uh, Homer had to go through that same thing because he was a pious person with what characteristic? Apologist. Yes, he was raising a little dispute, but reading Homer in the past and then talking about him now today in my classes, you could see that he had great visions of storytelling, and all you got to do is just read this one chapter 9, as the textbook calls it, the Odyssey, and he had many other trials and tribulations that he was trying to express. Um, Last thing I want to mention about Homer today is that he often questioned not only how people and the gods the Greek gods were making people react, but as he pondered the state of the world and the universe, he was very frustrated because he couldn't figure out scientifically, let's use that word, he couldn't say, well, this happens because of this, and why? Okay, let's use a rainbow. What causes a rainbow? We know more about that now than they did. The black moons, you guys have heard those. Full moons. The Greek gods are mad because this happened, and that's how they explain things. And definitely Homer knew that there was something else